I have always loved Tom. From the moment we met, everything felt perfect. We laughed, talked about our dreams, and spent hours together. I believed our marriage would always be strong, filled with love and happiness. But lately, things have started to change, and I don't know what to do. At first, I thought it was just a phase. Life gets busy, and people can become tired. Tom had always been a hard worker, and I understood that. I never complained when he worked late or went out with his friends. But then it became worse. It wasn't just that he worked late, it was that when he came home, he was distant. He didn't look at me the way he used to. He didn't smile at me like before. It felt like he was no longer interested in me, and I couldn't understand why. At night, we would sit on the couch together, but it felt like I was sitting alone. Tom would watch TV, and I would try to talk to him. I would ask him about his day, but he only answered with short sentences. His eyes didn't meet mine. It was as if he was somewhere else, not really here with me. I tried to be understanding. I told myself it was just stress from work. Maybe he was tired, but the distance kept growing. Tom started spending more time on his phone, answering messages and emails late into the night. I felt invisible. I felt like I wasn't important anymore. One evening, I made Tom's favorite dinner. I wanted to surprise him, to remind him of the love we had. But when he came home, he didn't even look at the food. He just walked into the living room and sat down, scrolling through his phone. I tried to talk to him, but he barely noticed me. He was lost in his phone, his mind somewhere far away. I felt a knot in my stomach, a feeling I couldn't shake off. It wasn't just that he didn't eat the dinner, it was that he didn't care. He didn't care about me anymore. The next few days were the same. I tried to fix things. I asked him how his day was. I cooked his favorite meals. I even bought a new dress, hoping it would make him notice me again. But nothing worked. Tom was always busy, always distracted. The more I tried, the more he pulled away. It felt like we were living in the same house, but we weren't really living together. I couldn't understand what was happening. Was it me? Had I changed? Was I not good enough for him anymore? These thoughts kept running through my mind. I started to feel insecure, like I was the problem. I began to wonder if Tom had fallen out of love with me. Maybe I wasn't exciting enough for him. Maybe he was looking for something else, something I couldn't give him. I became anxious. Every time Tom came home, I would wait for him to speak to me, to show me some attention. But most of the time, he didn't. He would go straight to the couch, open his laptop, and start working or checking emails. I felt like I was invisible to him. I started to feel small, like I didn't matter anymore. One afternoon, I walked into the living room to find Tom sitting at his desk, his eyes focused on his laptop screen. I tried to talk to him, but he didn't look up. I stood there, watching him, feeling my heart sink. This wasn't the man I married. I remembered when we first met. He used to look at me with so much love in his eyes. He would talk to me for hours, ask about my day, and listen to me. But now, it felt like I was a stranger to him. The man I loved was slipping away, and I didn't know why. I decided to do something about it. I couldn't just sit there and watch my marriage fall apart. I wanted to fix things, to bring back the connection we once had. I began to read relationship books, hoping to find answers. I talked to some of my friends, asking if they had ever gone through something like this. They all told me that marriage was hard work, but that if both people were willing to try, things could get better. I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe that we could fix it. So I tried even harder. I planned special nights for us, dinners, movies, walks in the park. I hoped that maybe if we spent more time together, things would improve. But nothing changed. Tom still seemed distant. He still didn't seem interested in me. I started to feel like I was living in a dream where everything was perfect, but now it was falling apart and I couldn't wake up. One evening, as I cleaned the house, I found something. It wasn't big, but it made my heart race. I found an email on Tom's laptop. It was about a new business project he had been working on. The email was from one of his colleagues, talking about the project and how excited they were to get started. I read the message, but it wasn't the content that made me feel uneasy. It was the tone. Tom had been spending a lot of time working on this project, and it seemed like it was becoming very important to him. I had never heard him talk about it before. I had never seen him so excited about something other than me. I sat there, staring at the screen. Could it be that Tom was losing interest in me because he was so focused on his work? Could it be that this project was taking up all his time and energy? The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this could be the reason for the distance between us. It wasn't that he didn't love me anymore. It was that he had become obsessed with something else. I wasn't sure how to feel. I wasn't angry at him for working hard. I understood that he wanted to be successful, but I was hurt. I felt like I wasn't enough. I wasn't enough to keep his attention. I wasn't enough to make him care about me the way he used to. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I had to talk to him. I had to find out the truth. But even as I thought about it, I wasn't sure how to begin. How do you tell someone you love that you feel like they don't love you back? How do you tell them that you feel invisible in your own marriage? I didn't know the answer, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay. I took a deep breath and sat down on the couch, waiting for Tom to come home. I had no idea what I was going to say, but I knew that I couldn't let this go on any longer. The love I had for him was still there, but I needed to know if he still felt the same way. The next few days passed in a blur of confusion and sadness. I couldn't stop thinking about the email I had found. Tom had been so focused on his new project that he barely looked at me. I wanted to know more about it. I wanted to understand why this project seemed so important to him and why it was making him act so distant. Was it just his work, or was there something else? I didn't know what to think anymore, but I had to find answers. I started paying closer attention to Tom's actions. He came home late every night, his face tired but excited. He would talk to me for a few minutes, but most of the time, he was lost in his thoughts. I could see that he was thinking about his project, and that made me feel even more invisible. The man I loved was so focused on something else, and I was left alone with my thoughts and my fear. I tried to ask him about his day, but he would only give me short answers. He would say things like, "It was fine," or "I had a busy day." He never went into detail, never told me anything about his work or how he was feeling. I wanted to understand what was going on, but I didn't know how to ask. It was like there was a wall between us and I couldn't get through. Every night, I waited for him to come home. I would cook dinner, try to make our home feel warm and inviting, but it was never the same. Tom would sit on the couch, his eyes glued to his phone or laptop. He wasn't even really there with me. I began to feel like a stranger in my own home. We lived together, but it didn't feel like we were a family anymore. I didn't want to give up on him, but I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. I had to find out what was really happening. I needed to understand what was going on in Tom's mind. So I decided to search for more clues. I wasn't proud of it, but I felt like I had no other choice. I had to know the truth. One afternoon, I sat down at Tom's desk while he was out. I didn't feel good about looking through his things, but my heart told me I had to. I opened his laptop and started searching through his emails. I found more messages about his project. They were full of excitement and plans for the future. Tom was talking about new goals, new ideas, and new dreams. But there was something strange about it. It felt like he was more in love with this project than with me. It was clear that this was taking up all his energy, all his time, and all his thoughts. As I read more, I felt a mixture of sadness and understanding. Tom wasn't having an affair with someone else. It wasn't another woman that was stealing his attention. It was his work. This project was everything to him, and it seemed like he had forgotten about the life we had built together. I felt lost. I wanted to be happy for him, but I couldn't ignore the emptiness inside me. I wanted him to love me the way he used to. I wanted him to care about me the way he cared about his work. I closed the laptop and sat there for a while, thinking about everything I had learned. Part of me wanted to talk to him right away, to ask him why he was doing this. But another part of me was scared. What if he didn't care anymore? What if his project was more important than our marriage? I wasn't sure I could handle the answer, but I knew I had to ask him. I had to know what was going on. The next day, I decided to try again. I made dinner just like I always did and waited for Tom to come home. I felt a strange mix of hope and fear. What if this was the moment everything changed? What if he finally saw how much I needed him? But when he walked in, he barely looked at me. He went straight to the couch, sat down, and pulled out his phone. I took a deep breath and walked over to him. I tried to stay calm, to keep my voice steady, but it was hard. I asked him about his project, asked him how it was going, and if he was excited about it. Tom smiled and nodded, but it wasn't the smile I remembered. It wasn't the smile that used to make me feel loved. This smile was distant, distracted. It felt like he wasn't really listening to me. He started talking about his project, but he didn't ask about me. He didn't ask how I was feeling or how my day had been. It was as if I didn't matter anymore. I sat there listening to him, but the words felt empty. I didn't want to hear about his project. I wanted him to talk to me, to care about me like he used to. I wanted to feel like I was still important to him. That night, I went to bed alone. Tom was still working, still focused on his project. I lay there in the dark, feeling so alone. The bed felt cold without him beside me. I tried to sleep, but my mind was racing. I thought about everything that had happened. I thought about how things had changed so suddenly. One minute we were happy, and the next we were strangers. I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay when it wasn't. But what could I do? I loved Tom, but it felt like he was slipping away from me, and I didn't know how to bring him back. I wanted to fix things, but I didn't know how. I thought about asking him again about telling him how I felt, but I was scared. What if he didn't care? What if he didn't want to try anymore? I woke up the next morning with a decision in my mind. I needed to find out what was really happening. I needed to talk to Tom about his work and how it was affecting us. I couldn't keep feeling this way, so lost and confused. I had to know where we stood, and I had to know if he still loved me. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but I had to try. My heart was heavy, but I couldn't keep living in the dark. It was time to face the truth, no matter how hard it might be. I just hoped that when I finally got the answers I needed, it wouldn't be too late. The next few days were full of tension. I tried to act normal, but I felt like something was breaking inside me. Tom was still focused on his project, and it seemed like nothing was changing. Every day, he came home late, barely spoke to me, and went straight to his laptop or phone. I tried to tell myself that maybe it was just a busy time for him, that it would pass. But deep down, I knew that things weren't just going to fix themselves. The gap between us was growing, and I could feel it more with every passing moment. I couldn't keep waiting for him to notice me. I had to do something. I needed to have a conversation with him, even if it was hard. It felt like I was walking on a tightrope, afraid of falling, afraid of hearing the words I wasn't ready for. But I couldn't go on living like this, pretending that everything was okay when it clearly wasn't. One afternoon, after Tom came home and sat down on the couch without saying much, I decided that it was time. I walked over to him, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew that I had to say something, but I didn't know how to start. I didn't want to make him angry, but I couldn't keep pretending that nothing was wrong. I sat down beside him and took a deep breath. I told him that I felt like we were growing apart, that I missed the way things used to be. I told him that I felt like I wasn't a priority anymore, that his project seemed to be more important than our marriage. I didn't accuse him of anything. I just told him how I was feeling, how lonely I felt when he didn't look at me or talk to me like he used to. Tom looked at me for a moment, his face unreadable. He didn't say anything at first, and that made me even more nervous. I wanted him to say something, anything, to show that he cared. But instead, he looked away and stared at the TV as if he hadn't heard me. My heart sank. Was he ignoring me on purpose? Was he trying to avoid the truth? I didn't know. I felt a wave of frustration rise inside me. Why didn't he care? Why didn't he want to fix this? I was talking to him, opening up, and he wasn't even listening. I felt like I was talking to a wall. This wasn't the man I had married. He had always been there for me before, always listened, always cared. But now it felt like he was shutting me out, and I didn't know how to reach him anymore. I stood up and walked out of the room, tears welling up in my eyes. I went to the kitchen and tried to calm down. I didn't want to cry, but I couldn't help it. I felt so helpless, so small. Why was it so hard for him to see how much I needed him? Why was it so hard for him to notice that I was slipping away from him? I spent the rest of the evening in the kitchen trying to distract myself. I cooked dinner, washed the dishes, and did everything I could to keep my mind busy. But no matter what I did, I couldn't stop thinking about the conversation I had tried to have with Tom. I couldn't stop thinking about how he had looked at me with such indifference, as if I didn't matter. That night, I went to bed early, hoping to get some rest. But my mind kept racing. I thought about our marriage, about how things had changed, and I couldn't stop blaming myself. Had I done something wrong? Had I said something that pushed him away? I began to doubt myself, questioning everything. Maybe I wasn't enough for him. Maybe I was too much. I didn't know. The next morning, I woke up early and decided to take a walk. I needed to clear my mind. I needed to figure out what to do next. I couldn't keep going like this. I couldn't keep living in this emotional fog. I had to make a choice. I had to decide whether I was going to keep fighting for my marriage or whether I was going to walk away. I walked around the park, taking in the fresh air and trying to think clearly. The sun was shining and everything seemed peaceful, but I couldn't shake the heaviness in my heart. Every time I thought about Tom, I felt a sharp pain in my chest. I missed him so much, but it didn't feel like he missed me. I wanted to feel loved again, to feel that connection we once had. But how could I make that happen when it felt like he was no longer interested in me? As I walked, I thought about the things I had read in books about relationships. They all said the same thing: communication was key. But what if he wasn't willing to talk? What if he didn't want to fix things? I didn't have the answers. I didn't know what was going on in his mind. And that scared me. I sat down on a bench in the park and took out my phone. I looked at the pictures of Tom and me from happier times. We had traveled together, laughed together, and shared so many special moments. I couldn't understand how we had gone from that to this. How had we gotten so far apart? Tears started to fall again, and I wiped them away quickly. I didn't want anyone to see me like this. I didn't want anyone to know how broken I felt inside. I stood up and began walking again, trying to clear my mind, but the thoughts wouldn't stop. They kept coming, one after another, each one more painful than the last. Eventually, I returned home. Tom was sitting on the couch, just like he always was. He barely looked up when I walked in. It felt like nothing had changed. I wanted to say something, to tell him how I felt, but I didn't know where to start. I couldn't help but feel like I was losing him. I couldn't help but feel like we were drifting apart, and I didn't know how to bring us back together. I sat down on the couch next to him and tried to gather my thoughts. I knew that I needed to talk to him again, but I wasn't sure how. What if he didn't care anymore? What if I had waited too long to fix things? My heart was heavy with doubt, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't keep living like this. I had to know where we stood. I had to know if there was still a chance for us. I took a deep breath and looked at Tom. He didn't notice me, but I knew I couldn't wait forever. Something had to change, and I had to be the one to make it happen. That evening, I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing with thoughts of Tom, of everything that had happened, and of what I needed to do next. The silence in the house was deafening. It felt like we were living in two different worlds. I could hear him in the other room, working on his project again. The sounds of his typing and clicking filled the space between us. It was like we were so close, yet so far apart. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay. I needed to talk to him, to ask him what was going on in his mind, but I didn't know how. The last time I tried, he didn't even listen to me. He just ignored me, like I wasn't even there. It hurt more than I wanted to admit. I thought about how we used to talk, how we used to be a team, but now it felt like he had become a stranger. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the past. I remembered the days when we laughed together, when we would spend hours talking about our dreams and plans for the future. But now, those dreams felt far away. All I wanted was to feel like we were a couple again, but it seemed like I was the only one trying. I thought about the things I had done for him in the past, the ways I had supported him, and I began to wonder if it had all been enough. Was I enough for him? Maybe I had made mistakes, too. Maybe I wasn't doing enough to keep our relationship strong. But I didn't know what more I could do. I had always tried to be there for him, to support him in his dreams. But now, it felt like his dream was more important than me. The next day, I woke up early, still feeling the heaviness in my heart. Tom was already awake, already working. I didn't know how much longer I could take it. I was tired of waiting, tired of being ignored. I needed answers, and I needed them now. I decided to take a different approach. Instead of waiting for him to come to me, I decided to confront him directly. I couldn't keep letting him act like everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. I needed him to understand how I was feeling, and I needed him to see that I wasn't going to wait forever. I made breakfast, trying to keep myself busy, but my mind kept going back to the same thoughts. What if he didn't care? What if he was so lost in his project that he didn't even notice what was happening to us? I didn't want to think that, but it was hard not to. The more I thought about it, the more scared I became. What if we couldn't fix this? When Tom finally came into the kitchen, he didn't say much. He just grabbed a coffee and sat at the table, staring at his phone. I watched him, feeling more distant than ever. I could feel the cold air between us, and I knew I couldn't wait any longer. I took a deep breath and decided to speak up. I told him that I was worried. I told him that I didn't feel like we were a team anymore. I told him that it hurt me to see him so focused on his project, to see him giving all his time and energy to something that didn't include me. I wasn't angry, but I was scared. I was scared of losing him, of becoming invisible to him. I needed him to see that we had something important, something worth fighting for. Tom listened, but his face remained neutral. He didn't seem surprised. Maybe he knew this was coming, or maybe he just didn't care. His response was calm, but it didn't make me feel better. He told me that he was just really focused on his work right now, that it was something important. I understood that, but I didn't know how to accept it. Why was his work more important than our marriage? Didn't we have dreams too? I felt a lump form in my throat, but I held back my tears. I didn't want to cry in front of him. I didn't want to show him how much he was hurting me, but it was hard to keep my feelings inside. I had been holding on for so long, and now I felt like I was losing grip. I tried to explain again. I told him that I wasn't asking him to stop working, but I was asking him to make time for us. I needed him to be present, to care about me the way he used to. I needed him to see that I was still here, that I still wanted to be a part of his life. But it didn't seem like he understood. He just nodded and said he would try to do better. But I didn't believe him. I had heard those words before, and nothing had changed. The rest of the day felt like a blur. Tom went back to his project, and I went through the motions of daily life. I cleaned, cooked, and tried to distract myself from the pain I felt, but I couldn't escape it. Every time I looked at him, I felt like I was looking at a stranger. The man I loved was slipping away, and I didn't know how to stop it. That night, I sat in bed, staring at the ceiling again. I couldn't sleep. My mind kept racing, and the weight in my chest felt unbearable. What if he never changed? What if he never saw how much I needed him? I couldn't keep living like this, but I didn't know what to do. I was scared of being alone, but I was even more scared of being with someone who didn't care about me. I thought about leaving. I thought about walking away from the relationship that had once been my whole world. But I wasn't ready to give up. I couldn't let go of the love I had for him, even if he was pulling away from me. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew that I had to keep trying. I wasn't ready to lose him completely. As I lay there in the dark, I realized that this wasn't just about Tom. It was about me, too. I needed to find a way to take care of myself, to stop blaming myself for everything that was wrong in our marriage. I had tried my best, and I had given everything to this relationship. But now I needed to figure out what I needed, what would make me happy, even if it wasn't with him. I didn't have the answers yet, but I knew I had to start looking for them. It was the only way to move forward. The next few days felt like a heavy cloud hanging over me. I kept trying to hold on to hope, but the longer I waited for things to get better, the more I felt like I was losing myself. Tom was still distant, still focused on his work, and I was left feeling small and invisible. I tried to ignore the growing emptiness in my heart, but it was becoming harder and harder. Every time I looked at him, I felt like I was looking at someone I didn't recognize. I couldn't keep waiting for him to change. I had to stop blaming myself for everything that was happening between us. But it wasn't easy. I had spent so many years believing that our love would always be strong, that we would always be there for each other. Now, everything felt uncertain. I didn't know what to do anymore. I spent a lot of time thinking about my own needs. What did I really want? Was it worth staying in a relationship where I felt so alone? I had always put Tom's needs before mine. I had always tried to make him happy, to make him feel loved and supported. But now I realized that I had been neglecting myself. I had lost sight of my own happiness in the process. I needed to change that. It wasn't easy to let go of the image I had of our perfect life together. I had always imagined that Tom and I would grow old together, that we would share everything, our dreams, our fears, our joys, and our struggles. But now, that image felt like a distant memory. We were drifting apart, and I didn't know how to stop it. One afternoon, I decided to take a break from everything. I went for a walk by myself to clear my mind. The weather was nice, and the park was peaceful. It felt good to be outside, away from the weight of the situation at home. I needed to think clearly, to focus on what I needed to do for myself. As I walked, I thought about the life I had before Tom. I had been independent, strong, and full of hope. I had dreams of my own, goals that I wanted to achieve. Somewhere along the way, I had forgotten about those things. I had become so wrapped up in our marriage, in making Tom happy, that I had lost sight of who I was. I realized that I needed to find my way back to that person. I couldn't keep losing myself in the relationship. When I returned home, I felt a little lighter. I had made a decision. I couldn't keep waiting for Tom to change. I couldn't keep hoping that things would magically get better. It was time for me to take control of my own life. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew that I had to start focusing on myself, on my own happiness. I didn't know if Tom would ever understand what I was going through. I didn't know if he cared enough to change, but I couldn't keep living in this emotional fog. I needed to make a choice. Either I would keep fighting for something that seemed impossible, or I would move on and find a new path for myself. The next day, I started to make small changes. I spent more time doing things I enjoyed. I took up a hobby I had forgotten about, something that made me feel alive and confident. I began to take care of myself, both physically and mentally. I made time for my friends, for the people who cared about me. I stopped waiting for Tom to notice me and started noticing myself again. As the days passed, I began to feel stronger. It wasn't easy. There were moments when I felt like I was losing everything, but I reminded myself that I was still here, still alive, and still worthy of love and happiness. Tom, on the other hand, seemed to notice that something was different. He began asking me questions, trying to understand why I was spending more time away from him. I didn't know how to explain everything to him. I didn't want to blame him, but I also didn't want to hide the truth anymore. I was changing, and I wasn't sure if he was going to keep up with me. One evening, I sat down with him and I told him that I was taking a step back. I explained that I couldn't keep living in the shadows of his work. I couldn't keep feeling like I didn't matter. I told him that I needed to find my own path, that I needed to focus on my own happiness. It wasn't easy to say, but it was something I had to do. Tom listened, but he didn't say much. He seemed surprised, maybe even hurt, but I wasn't sure what he was feeling anymore. I had tried to reach out to him, to talk to him about what I was going through, but it felt like I had already said everything I could. He had to figure things out for himself now. I didn't know what would happen next. Maybe Tom would change. Maybe he wouldn't. But I had made the decision to stop waiting. I had decided that I was worth more than the silence and the distance. I was worthy of love, of connection, and of happiness. The next few days were difficult. I still had moments of doubt, moments when I wondered if I had made the right choice. But I kept reminding myself that I couldn't keep losing myself in someone else's life. I had my own life to live. I wasn't sure where I was going, but I knew that I couldn't stay stuck in the same place anymore. And so I moved forward. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I didn't know what the future held for Tom and me, but I knew that I had to keep going. I had to keep searching for my own happiness, and I had to stop waiting for someone else to give it to me. It's been a few weeks since I made the decision to focus on myself. Life has been different, and in many ways, it has been difficult. There are moments when I wonder if I did the right thing. I still think about Tom, about the good times we had, but I also know that I can't keep holding on to a relationship that isn't working. I can't keep waiting for someone else to change. I have to change for myself. Over the past few days, I've started to feel more like myself again. I've been spending time with friends, going on walks, reading books, and doing things that make me happy. I've even started a small project of my own, something that I've been wanting to do for a long time, but never had the chance. It feels good to be back in control of my life. For the first time in a long while, I feel like I'm taking care of me. One evening, I sat down and thought about what had happened between Tom and me. I realized that I wasn't the only one who had changed. Tom had changed too. Maybe he didn't know how to handle everything that was going on in his life. Maybe he had gotten so lost in his work that he forgot how important our relationship was. But I couldn't change him. I couldn't make him see what he was doing to us. I had tried, but in the end, it wasn't enough. The hardest part for me was accepting that we were no longer the couple we once were. There was a time when we were inseparable, when everything felt easy and full of love. But somewhere along the way, we lost that connection. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay when I knew it wasn't. I thought about the decision I made about focusing on myself, and I realized that it was the best choice I could have made. I couldn't keep waiting for someone else to make me happy. I had to make myself happy. I had to stop letting my happiness depend on someone else. It was hard at first, but the more I focused on myself, the easier it became. I started to see that I was enough on my own. As the weeks passed, I found myself thinking less and less about Tom. At first, I missed him. I missed his presence, the way we used to laugh together, the way we used to share our dreams. But those memories didn't hold the same weight anymore. They were part of my past, part of who I was, but they weren't who I was becoming. I realized that I didn't need him to feel whole. I didn't need anyone to define who I was. I had always been strong, independent, and capable of living my own life. Tom and I still saw each other occasionally, but it was different now. I no longer felt the same pressure to make things work. I wasn't angry at him anymore, but I also wasn't willing to put my life on hold for him. I was no longer waiting for him to change. I had learned to let go. One day, I received a message from Tom. He said he wanted to talk, that he had been thinking about everything that had happened between us. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I knew that I couldn't go back to the way things were. I had changed, and I wasn't going to let anyone take away the progress I had made. When we met, I could tell that Tom had been thinking a lot about our relationship. He told me that he understood now how distant he had become and that he regretted it. He apologized for the way he treated me, for the way he had ignored my needs. But even though I could see that he was sorry, I knew that things could never go back to the way they were. I listened to him, and for the first time, I realized that I had truly let go. I didn't need his apology to move on. I didn't need him to fix what had been broken. I had already started to rebuild my life on my own. We both knew that our relationship had changed. It wasn't what it used to be, and it wasn't going to be. But that didn't mean it was the end. We still had respect for each other, and we still cared about each other, but the love we had shared had faded. I knew it was time to move forward separately. It wasn't easy. There were moments when I missed the old days, when I wished things could have turned out differently. But I knew that I had done everything I could to make it work. I had tried to fix what was broken, but sometimes things just can't be fixed. Sometimes people change and relationships change, and you have to accept that. As I walked away from that conversation, I felt a sense of peace. I had made the right choice for myself. I had stopped waiting for someone else to change, and I had started living for me. The road ahead wasn't clear, but I knew that I was strong enough to face whatever came next. I had found my own happiness again, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it away from me. I didn't know what the future held, but I was ready to face it with a sense of hope. I had learned that my happiness didn't depend on anyone else. I had the power to create my own future, and that was something no one could take from me. I was no longer waiting, I was living. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free.